of the wall clock. The sun wasn't fully up yet, but enough light spilled through the blinds to paint faint lines across the counter. Everything felt ordinary, steady, predictable. I was 58 then, comfortable with routines, comfortable with the way life had settled into calmer rhythms. I never imagined that a single quiet message from my grandson could soften a day I had once filed away as difficult. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. He always walked quickly but lightly, almost like he didn't want to disturb anything around him. When he appeared in the doorway, he looked a little unsure, almost as if he wasn't sure whether he should be there at all. His hands were tucked into the pockets of his jacket, and his eyes kept shifting between me and the floor. He was 17, tall and growing into himself, but that morning he looked younger, more reserved, and strangely thoughtful. "Grandma, do you have a minute?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. I dried my hands with the towel hanging by the sink and nodded. "Of course I do. Come in. What's on your mind?" He stepped inside slowly and took a seat at the small table by the window, the one he used to sit at when he was little, coloring or talking my ear off about things he learned in school. But now he sat differently, upright, quiet, almost protective of whatever he was holding inside. I poured us both some warm tea without asking him. It was something I always did when he looked troubled. Sometimes a warm cup made it easier to talk. He wrapped his hands around the mug but didn't drink. Instead, he listened to the faint birds outside and the occasional car passing on the street. I could feel something building in the silence, something he wasn't sure how to release. I didn't push him. I just waited, watching the sunlight grow brighter on the window pane. "Grandma," he finally said, "I know you're trying to stay strong about everything going on." His voice wavered just a little, and that's when I understood what day it was for him. The anniversary of something I tried to forget but never truly could. A day touched with sadness I rarely allowed myself to name. My heart tightened, not from the memory itself, but from the fact that he remembered. He continued, "I didn't want you to wake up feeling alone today." Those words, gentle, unexpected, spoken with a sincerity that made the room feel warmer. I think the world shifted quietly in that moment. You didn't know how much strength it took for me each year to walk through that day without letting it swallow me. And yet there he was, offering comfort in the simplest way. No grand gestures, no dramatic moments, just presence, just awareness. I took a slow breath and reached out, resting my hand lightly near his on the table, not touching, just close enough he could feel I appreciated him. "Thank you," I said softly. "I didn't expect you to remember." He shrugged slightly, still looking down at the tea. "I didn't forget. You always take care of everyone else. I wanted to make sure someone was taking care of you today." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. It had been a long time since someone noticed the quiet weight I carried. He wasn't trying to fix anything, and he wasn't trying to make me relive anything. He was simply acknowledging that I had lived through it, and somehow that small act unraveled years of silence I had wrapped around myself. We sat together for a while, neither of us rushing the moment. He didn't ask for stories or explanations. He just stayed, sipping his tea and letting me breathe in the comfort of having company on a morning that usually felt heavier than I wanted to admit. I realized then that sometimes the most meaningful moments aren't loud or dramatic. Sometimes they come in the shape of a quiet message, spoken gently by someone who sees you more clearly than you realize. And that morning, because of him, the day felt different, lighter, warmer, and no longer something I was walking through alone. When he finally looked up and met my eyes, I knew this was only the beginning of what he wanted to share. And I felt a shift inside me, like a door had opened to something I wasn't expecting but deeply needed. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now before I continue, tell me where you are watching from. I always love seeing the places these memories reach. After we finished our tea, the morning settled into a gentle calm, the kind that makes you feel as if the world has slowed down just a little to give you space to breathe. My grandson sat quietly, still thoughtful, still carrying something he hadn't fully spoken. I could see it in the way he traced the rim of his cup, his shoulders tense despite his calm expression. He had more to say, and I sensed he was choosing his words carefully. I stood up and opened the curtains a little wider. The backyard glowed with that soft golden light that only appears in the morning. It spilled across the grass and brushed gently against the old maple tree. I'd always felt steadier when the house was filled with sunlight, and maybe he needed that too. When I sat back down, he lifted his eyes to me in a way that felt almost like asking permission to continue. "Grandma, can I tell you something else?" he said, his voice quiet. I nodded. "You can tell me anything." He inhaled slowly, the kind of deep breath someone takes before pulling the truth from a place they've kept tucked away for too long. "I didn't just come because of the date. I came because I've been thinking about how you always stay strong, even when things get hard. I used to think you just didn't feel things the way I do. But now I realize you do. You just don't want anyone to worry." His words were soft, but they struck something deep inside me. He wasn't accusing me of anything, just observing, gently, honestly. And he was right. Over the years, I had become good at tucking my own feelings away so my family could lean on me. Somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that being strong meant being silent. He continued, "I guess I don't want to grow up thinking that hiding everything is the only way to handle life. I want to understand how you do it." My chest tightened with emotion, gentle emotion, not painful. This was a conversation I never expected to have with him, not at his age, not in this way. But he was old enough to see the outline of things, old enough to notice what others missed. I placed my hands around my own cup, feeling the warmth seep into my palms. Sweetheart, strength doesn't mean you don't feel things. It just means you choose how to carry them. Sometimes you carry them quietly because you don't want your pain to spill into someone else's life. And sometimes, I paused, searching for the right words, sometimes you forget that you're allowed to set those feelings down. He listened intently, nodding slowly. "I think I forgot for a long time that I'm allowed to ask for help too," I added. He looked surprised. "You? Ask for help?" I let out a soft breath. "Yes, even me. I just got used to taking care of everyone else, and eventually it felt easier to stay quiet about my own burdens." He leaned back in his chair, processing that. Something softened in his face, like understanding settling naturally. "I didn't know you felt like that." I didn't realize how much I needed to say it, I admitted. The room grew still again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one felt fuller, more open. Like a door between us had quietly unlocked. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. For a moment he hesitated, then placed it gently on the table between us. "I wrote this a few nights ago. I wasn't sure if I should show you." I stared at the folded page, feeling a faint mix of curiosity and tenderness. "What is it?" I asked. "It's something I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how to say it out loud." My heart began to beat a little faster, not in fear, but in the unexpected weight of his honesty. I could feel something important resting in that piece of paper, something he felt deeply enough to put into words. "Do you want me to read it now?" I asked softly. He nodded once, quietly. I reached for the paper, slowly unfolding it, not knowing that the words inside would take the morning in a direction neither of us expected, a direction that would change the way I remembered that day forever. I unfolded the paper slowly, smoothing it gently against the table. The handwriting was unmistakably his, neat in some places, rushed in others, as if the words had come to him in uneven waves. He watched me closely, not nervously, but with a quiet hopefulness that made me take a steadying breath before I began reading. The message wasn't long, but it carried weight. Every line spoke from a place of sincerity that caught me off guard. He wrote about how he'd been feeling lately, how school had been overwhelming, how he sometimes felt lost between who he was expected to be and who he was still figuring out. He wrote about the pressure of being the oldest child, the one everyone silently assumed would always turn out fine. And somewhere in those words, he admitted he didn't always feel fine. He didn't always feel steady. He didn't always feel brave. But what touched me most was the way he described me. He wrote that watching me stay strong through the hardest parts of life made him feel like he could get through anything, too. That even on days he felt unsure of the world, he found comfort in just being around me, sitting at my kitchen table, listening to me talk about things in that calm way I've had since he was small. He wrote that he didn't want to wait until he was older to tell me how much that mattered. By the time I reached the bottom of the page, my eyes felt warm. The kind of warmth that comes not from sadness, but from being seen in a way you didn't expect. I placed the paper down gently and looked at him. "I didn't know you felt all this," I said softly. He swallowed, his voice low. "I didn't think I should bother you with it. You've been through so much already." I shook my head slowly, absorbing his words. "You're never a bother, not for a single moment." He exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders. There was something deeply brave about what he'd done, sharing feelings most adults struggle to admit, let alone teenagers who fear being misunderstood. "You know," I continued, "I didn't handle everything perfectly when I was your age either. I made mistakes. I doubted myself. I carried worries I didn't know how to talk about. But I wish someone had told me then what I'm going to tell you now." He leaned closer, listening intently. "You don't have to know everything. You don't have to be strong all the time. And you certainly don't have to face things alone. Life feels much heavier when you try to hold it all without letting anyone help." He rubbed his palms together thoughtfully. "I guess I just didn't want to disappoint anyone." I gave him a gentle smile. "The only way you could disappoint me is by pretending you're someone you're not. I want you to be honest with yourself. Honest with me. That's what matters." He nodded slowly, and something in his expression softened, like a weight he'd been carrying for far too long was finally letting go. The sunlight streaming through the window shifted slightly, warming his face, and for a moment he didn't look 17. He looked older somehow, shaped by everything he just shared, and everything he was learning to accept. We sat together in that quiet understanding, the kind that doesn't need dramatic moments or loud declarations. The house felt warm, grounded, steady, and so did he. After a long pause, he spoke again. "Grandma," he said gently, "there's more I want to tell you. Not bad stuff, just things I haven't said yet, things I think you should know." I felt a small flutter in my chest, not fear, but anticipation. His tone wasn't heavy anymore. It was thoughtful, almost peaceful. Whatever he was about to share wasn't a burden. It was something he wanted to give. "What is it?" I asked quietly. He glanced around the kitchen, as if gathering the right words from the air itself. Then he looked back at me. "It's about that day you always try to forget," he said softly. "I think I understand it differently now, and I want to tell you what I realized." The room grew still, not tense, not uncomfortable, just still in the way important moments tend to be. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside me, waiting for him to continue, knowing that whatever he said next would shape the rest of that day and the memory that had lived quietly in both of us for years. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. And before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. It always warms my heart to see the different places these stories reach. He sat across from me, his hands resting loosely on the table now, no longer tense or fidgeting. There was a calmness in his eyes that hadn't been there earlier, a gentleness that made me feel both grounded and strangely expectant. When he spoke again, his tone carried a quiet confidence, like he had finally found the words he'd been searching for. "I've been thinking a lot about that day," he said softly. "The one you always try to move past. And I realized something. I don't remember the sadness the way other people do. I remember you." His words settled into the room with a warmth I didn't fully expect. I watched him as he continued, choosing each sentence like it mattered, which, to him, it clearly did. "You always talk about that time like it was the end of something," he said. "But when I think about it, I see the beginning of who you became for us. You didn't fall apart, even though you had every reason. You kept showing up. For Mom. For me. For the whole family. I think that's why I wanted to come today. Not to remind you of what hurt, but to remind you of what grew from it." His perspective washed over me in a way that felt almost cleansing. I had carried that day like a shadow for so long, convinced it had marked me in ways I couldn't erase. But hearing him describe it not as a wound, but as a turning point, one that shaped his life too, made something inside me loosen. "I never thought of it like that," I whispered. "I know," he replied, leaning forward slightly, "because you lived the hardest part of it. But I lived the part where you kept going. And that's the part that changed my life. I guess. I wanted you to know that. I wanted you to hear it from me." A quiet warmth rose in my chest, spreading slowly, steadily, like sunlight filtering through a window on a winter afternoon. I felt seen, not for my strength alone, but for the parts of me that had quietly fought to stay whole. "You know," I said gently, "when you were little, I used to worry that I wasn't giving enough, that I wasn't always the kind of person you could lean on. I was afraid you'd grow up feeling a distance between us." He shook his head immediately. "I never felt distant from you. I think I always felt closest to you, even when we weren't talking about anything important." His honesty touched something deep, something fragile and resilient all at once. It was a reminder that love doesn't always grow from grand gestures. It often grows in the quiet moments, the small acts, the unseen efforts. We talked a little longer, drifting gently through memories and thoughts we had never voiced before. And with each moment, the air became lighter. The day, which had once held such heaviness for me, softened into something unexpectedly comforting. Eventually, he stood up from the table and walked over to the window, looking out at the backyard. The sunlight was brighter now, stretching across the grass like a warm blanket. He turned back toward me, his smile easy and relaxed. "I'm glad I came today," he said. "I didn't know exactly what I wanted to say at first, but I feel like I said what mattered." "You did," I answered, "more than you know." He walked back and leaned down slightly, resting his hand on mine in a quiet, respectful gesture that carried more meaning than words could. It wasn't dramatic or emotional in a heavy way. It was simply sincere. A moment of connection that made the entire morning feel transformed. "I hope you remember this day differently now," he said gently. "Not just for what happened back then, but for what happened today." And he was right. Something in me had shifted. The old memory no longer stood alone in its sorrow. It was now paired with something tender, something healing, something that redefined the way I would carry it from that moment forward. As he left the house, closing the door softly behind him, the warmth he brought lingered. The kitchen felt brighter. My heart felt lighter. And for the first time in many years, that day felt less like a burden and more like a reminder of resilience, of connection, and of the quiet ways love can arrive when you least expect it. His message had changed the way I remembered that day, and somehow it changed a part of me too.